Hello, and welcome to my list of the new releases I saw in January 2022. Every single month, I'm gonna do one of these videos, and the movies don't actually have to come out in the month that I see them. I'm just gonna rank the new movies that I saw in every single month. So maybe when we get to November, I'm gonna see a movie that came out in January, and I'm still gonna put it on the November list. But you're maybe going to find some movies on this list that you saw last year. The reason for that is that they came out in 2022 here in Denmark, where I live. So if you have that issue, well, maybe you should go watch some other video because there are going to be some. But there's also a lot of actually new movies that came out in 2022 everywhere. For example, the first one on the list, and I've seen 19 movies that came out this year in January for me. And the first one, number 19, is How I Fell in Love with a Gangster. This is a Polish crime drama that dropped on Netflix. I do have a review for it on the channel, sorry. It's a terrible movie. It is 3 hours long, and it is one of the most painfully boring movies I've ever seen. I didn't really like anything about it other than the fact that it looked great. That's about everything positive I have to say about it. Everything else is bad. Number 18 is Photocopier. This movie also came out on Netflix, and it was also really, really bad. I saw a lot of people who really enjoyed this, who thinks it's amazing, and I can appreciate the relevant issues within society that it touches upon. But I found it to be extremely boring. I didn't get invested at all, and I also think this is too long. Thankfully, not 3 hours like the last one. Number 17. This is the first one that I do not have a review for out on the channel. And every one of these movies that I don't have a review for out yet, I'm working on getting them out to you guys. So I haven't actually talked about this movie yet on this channel. My number 17 is The Ice Age Adventures of Buck Wild. This movie is just as bad as you've heard. This is the worst movie I saw this month. But I am more likely to rewatch this as opposed to the two previous movies. But it is absolutely horrendous. The voice cast, other than Simon Pegg and, let me see if I can pronounce this name, Utkarsh and Budkar, something along those lines. I'm 100% sure that's wrong. Other than those two, I thought the voice cast was terrible. The voices were so annoying, and therefore the characters were extremely annoying, and I didn't like any of them other than Buck Wild, and I didn't really like Orson, but I liked Utkarsh and Budkar. I do like Buck Wild as a character, but the movie isn't about Buck Wild. It's about Eddie and Crash. And I just found that to be really strange. It's called The Adventures of Buck Wild, and you're about 20 to 25% through the movie before Buck Wild shows up. And I just found that to be very strange. Other than that, the story is boring. The animation, I don't mind the animation style, but the actual animation is terrible, and it gets worse and worse and worse as the movie progresses. Number 16 is a movie that hasn't come out on Letterboxd yet, which annoys the shit out of me. It is a Danish movie called Temin Hunt, or the translation would be Take My Hand. This movie was also horrible. I think there are one or two performances that I somewhat enjoyed. A woman called Mille Lefeld did a wonderful job. She's so funny in everything she does, and I think Ulrik Thomsen does a pretty good job as well. But the acting, other than that, is just absolutely terrible. There's a central romance where there's zero chemistry, and the guy is absolutely horrible. He delivers zero lines convincingly, and the story is just really, really uninteresting, and it gets to the point where the main draw of the movie is the sex scenes. So therefore I have the same issues as I had with movies like Madame Claude that came out last year, where in my opinion, it's porn. This isn't as graphic as Madame Claude or as the 50 Shades of Grey movies, but when the main draw of a movie is sex, I call that porn. In 15th is Brazen. If you haven't been able to tell yet, this month was rough. We are up to the 5th lowest movie, and I'm still on a 2 out of 10. Brazen is really, really dreadful. At least it's entertaining all the way through. I was never bored, and I could have fun with the fact that it is as bad as it is. But the acting is terrible. The dialogue is terrible. It's extremely predictable. Like the first scene the killer shows up in, you know it's him. It is so bad. Number 14 is Hotel Transylvania Transfermania. You know you have an issue when the thing I like most about the movie is the title. I don't know why, but there's something just kind of amusing to me about the fact that it's called Transfermania and it's about what it's about. I don't know why. I shouldn't find it as funny as I do, but I think that's just, I don't know, it's just fun. But the story is boring. I'm sure kids are going to have fun, and that is what the movie has to do, and it does that. But me, as a new adult, I didn't really have anything to resonate with in this story or with these characters. I thought the animation style was, well, it wasn't something that spoke to me. I thought it was a little bit weird and annoying. But the actual animation is fine. It's pretty much the exact opposite of the Ice Age Adventures of Buck Wild, where I did like the animation style but hated the animation. Here, I like the actual animation, but I hate this animation style. Number 13 is El Páramo, or The Wasteland. This is a horror thriller type movie that came out in the beginning of January that honestly I've already kind of forgotten about. It didn't leave a huge imprint. It's stunning, like visually. I remember a shot of like you can see a corpse through the eye of this kid, and that's amazing. But the actual story was just kind of repetitive and got a bit boring and wasn't really very scary. In 12th position is The King's Man. Now, I hadn't seen a Kingsman movie before this one, but I knew roughly what to expect. Except I didn't, actually, because this isn't really a Kingsman movie for the first half to the first 2/3 of the movie. That is a political war drama that I wasn't really very interested in. I liked how it incorporated like World War I and stuff like that, how it incorporated this fake world with the actual reality of Prince Ferdinand getting shot. And I'm really interested in World War I, but this wasn't what I wanted from a Kingsman movie. What I wanted from a Kingsman movie was what I got in the third act, which I thought was awesome. I loved the stylized action, and that got me interested in watching the first two Kingsman movies. Number 11 is Quattro Metà, or For Two Dinner. This is an Italian rom-com movie that dropped on Netflix in the beginning of the month. And it is pretty bland. I like rom-coms, so I could be entertained by this, but there's something about the lighting in certain scenes, and it's just really generic and kind of confusing, actually. Number 10 is Mother/Android. The last thing I expected to say about this movie was the fact that it is really, really boring. You can do so much with this concept. It doesn't have to be fine cinema. It just has to be entertaining. Androids taking over the world, and it is not. It is just a pregnant woman and a black guy who are just really, really dumb. And just walking around talking. It's just really boring. It gets entertaining when she has to go save him, and then the final third of the movie, that's pretty entertaining and good enough. But the movie as a whole, not so much. Number 9 is The Tender Bar. Now, I love Ty Sheridan. I think he's an amazing prospect. But someone I loved even more was Ben Affleck. And Ben Affleck is what is carrying this movie. He is really, really good, and I loved Uncle Charlie in this movie. But the story, pretty predictable. I like the relationships, but I was just never wowed. It was just pretty middle of the road, pretty bland for me. We are all the way up to number 8, and it is still not actually very good. This is Nightmare Alley. I was pretty disappointed in this. On a technical aspect, this movie is incredible. The cast is amazing. The acting that they deliver is stunning. The directing is amazing. I think the actual story is intense, it's fascinating, it is interesting, it's compelling. But the pacing really, really takes a lot out of this movie. It is far too long. I didn't find the characters interesting. I didn't really find them compelling. There was one point where I thought that Bradley Cooper's character was kind of compelling, but then he just got like really mean-spirited and he just lost me again. And this movie was fascinating, and I love the fact that I watched it, but I don't think I'm ever gonna watch it again. Number 7 is The Royal Treatment. This is the Netflix movie with Laura Marano. And Laura Marano played Allie on Austin and Ally, which was my favorite show growing up. So just the fact that she was starring in a movie was something that I loved. She's not very good, and the acting isn't very good, and the dialogue is not very good, and it's really cringe. But as I mentioned with Quattro Metà, I love rom-coms, and this was much more up my alley than that other one. I think the central romance is good. They have great chemistry with one another. I'm sorry for my pronunciation. And yeah, I just thought it was really sweet and really heartwarming, although it was very predictable. Number 6 is the first one that I saw this year, and it is Harry Potter, the 20th anniversary return to Hogwarts. I am not on the same train as everyone else that loved this. I thought it was fine. I thought it was fun to see these people again, fun to see them interact, and I think we have some fun revelations. But I think this is so much of a wasted opportunity. I think if they had some sort of talk show host or someone who's just like a passionate Harry Potter fan but also knows journalism, and if you had the entire cast together, I think this would have worked so much better, because I think it's kind of disappointing to just see them interact in these small groups instead of getting that giant group dynamic. It is fun to see them interact with one another, but I wish we got more. I wish we got them in these bigger groups instead. Number 5 is The Tragedy of Macbeth. There are 2 things to say about this movie that is absolutely incredible. It is the cinematography. It is the most beautiful movie I have ever seen. And it's the acting. The acting is incredible, especially from Denzel Washington. I personally think he should win the Oscar. He's probably not going to, but I hope he does, because he is so incredible in this movie. He takes this Shakespearean dialogue and manages to deliver it in a way that feels natural. And he is better than everyone else in this movie, although the others are good as well. I loved seeing Corey Hawkins in this. He played my favorite character in The Heights. That was my favorite movie of last year. So it was amazing to see him again in this. However, the characters aren't really that interesting to me. I think the actual story was pretty difficult to keep track of, but the main issue I have with it is the fact that it wasn't really very compelling. But I was engaged by the cinematography and the performances. Number 4, and maybe a bit controversial, it's Scream. Scream 2022. So I just uploaded a review of Scream earlier today, and I thought it was pretty good. I thought that there was a lot of good things about the movie. I loved the new cast. I loved Jenna Ortega and Melissa Barrera. I already mentioned In the Heights being my favorite movie of last year. But I think this is pretty much the same that we've gotten in every single Scream movie so far. I thought that one of the killers was really predictable. The other was fine. That was pretty surprising to me. But it just didn't really do it for me. I thought it was fine. You can see that on the placement on this list. But it wasn't like the greatest Scream movie ever, and it wasn't close to the original. Number 3 is Munich, The Edge of War. I thought this is how to do a political drama. This also takes place in the years prior to a world war, so not during a world war like The King's Man did, but this is taking place it's a few years before World War II, and I thought this was so good. I thought this was very intense. I think the performances are incredible. George McKay is so good in this movie, and Jeremy Irons is almost carrying the entire movie on his shoulders. But I did have some issues with the fact that it slows down quite a bit and loses a bit of steam, and it didn't really have that like mind-blowing factor to it. But I thought it was really good. Number 2 is The Fallout. So this movie premiered on some film festival last year, but it just got its actual release on HBO Max. And I think this story is incredible. I think there is so much potential to this story. Sadly, I don't think it lives up to that potential. I think this, as interesting and compelling as the story is, you're sort of kept at arm's length in a way, where I was never like just giving myself over to the story. I was never completely invested. While I do think the performances are incredible. I love Jenna Ortega and I love seeing her getting movie roles. And I love Maddie Ziegler. I already mentioned Austin and Ally. It was basically my entire childhood, and she was a character that always stood out to me about that show. She only has a role in one episode, and I loved her. So seeing her now, it was just incredible, and she's really, really, really good. But number 1, the best movie that I saw in the month of January is Home Team. I don't know if this is controversial. Maybe it is, because it hasn't gotten brilliant reviews, but I just thought this was a really, really heartwarming and sweet story. I don't know how closely it ties to the actual story of Sean Payton, because I'm not a football fan. I'm a fan of European football, but I haven't really watched any American football. I think I've watched one game ever, and that was the Super Bowl that is like deemed as the worst Super Bowl ever. But I thought this was really, really sweet. I loved seeing Taylor Lautner back in a movie role. I hate the Twilight movies, but he is definitely a redeeming factor in those movies. And just seeing him here and him actually being good was just really fun to me. And I think Kevin James, for the first time ever, actually made me laugh. And I think the humor actually works. It is sweet, it is heartwarming, and it is actually funny. There are some issues. It's extremely generic, it's predictable. There's a vomiting sequence that wasn't funny at all. But other than that, the actual story was just really sweet. So those are the 19 movies that I saw in the month of January ranked. If you like what you saw, this is what I want to do on this channel. I want to see as many movies and as many TV shows as I possibly can and bring you guys the reviews. As I said, the movies that were on this list that I haven't reviewed yet, except for Harry Potter, that I saw that so long ago that I'm not going to review it. But the other movies, I will try my best to bring the reviews to you guys as soon as possible. And if you like what you saw, please consider clicking that subscribe button.